Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be my second video on this. I had a video that I had recorded and finished, but the file was corrupted. So, unfortunately, there was nothing that I could do. I've seen this full video at this point, but I'm going to do another reaction because I think the subject matter is important enough to cover. Now, for those who are unaware, there was a report and an accusation that came out that Concord, one of the biggest failures in gaming history, was actually more of a failure than even I thought. See, a lot of people were talking about $100 million loss for Concord. I was talking about probably upwards of $200 million because I was taking other things into account. Oh no, I was so completely wrong. 400 million, and by the way, people who are saying 400 million is sort of like the people that are saying that the PS5 Pro is $700. They're missing key factors in that. Like, you have to buy an additional stand, and if you want to be able to play your disc, you have to pay $80 for the disc variation. So, really, you're not paying $700, you're paying $800 plus tax and all that stuff. That is important to add in there. And in the context of this, the game cost $400 million, but that does not include the money that Sony spent to acquire Firewalk Studios to get the game. We don't know that number, but I imagine it wasn't insignificant. So this game is one of the most expensive failures in video game history. And so I want to go over this because if for nothing else, on my channel, this needs to stand for all time as a testament to the hubris and delusion of people that think they know better than the consumer. Now, you can have a vision, and you can have a direction for a game, and you can have a sort of momentum, but unless you look at what the audience wants and puts together a team that's willing to accomplish that, to put aside their personal politics and focus on the mission first and last and foremost, if you don't do that, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And according to this story from this guy, and this is from somebody that he trusts implicitly, somebody that worked at Firewalk Studios during the entire presentation of this whole debacle, and he gave him some key insights and information, and so I think it's important to go over it. So without further ado, I'd like to present this video for your consideration.
Because who really gives a shit? However, and I don't do journalism really anymore, as you guys know, and we talk about this a lot. I was a journalist at one time, and I used to break a lot of stories, and these days I don't really grind like that. So the stories that I break these days are usually people, or always, not usually, always people coming to me. And someone who worked on Concord reached out to me, and I verified who this person was and went through all that and talked to this person extensively, for a long time. And got some, I think, interesting information that I can share about Concord. I think people will be interested about it. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this is that Concord cost about $400 million to make.
$400 million!
And, the story goes that
$400 million! I want to put this in context for a lot of you people watching. $400 million. $400 million. See if I can scroll up and find it. By the way, great clip here. Yeah, that is basically a post about Concord spending $400 million, but Korean developers making like Zenless Zone Zero and Genshin Impact and all these other games just basically printing their own money. It's so ridiculous. But here, this post here, Concord cost $400 million. For reference, if the rumored budgets are correct, that's more than Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, and Rift Apart combined. Elden Ring, The Legend of Zelda, and Ratchet and Clank. The budget for this one game is more than them combined. Does that not make your balls recess into yourself just a little bit? Like, holy shit. That is stunning. And I also want to reiterate that this was the 400 million. These ugly, grotesque DEI characters, they thought that was going to be the next Star Wars? Ghost of Tsushima budget, 60 million. Concord, $400 million. Oh, what's this? Oh, this is Stellar Blade. That was kind of a jump scare, by the way. I wasn't expecting... I wasn't expecting that. Oh, man. But, you see, it's not just the cost of the game. That money could have gone to a whole lot of other projects that could have used it. It could have gone towards getting games out faster, giving people more money, giving them the opportunity to work more to get the game out faster, like the next God of War. You know the next God of War is a slam dunk. You know it's going to be a major hit. There are many different games that you could try to, expedite or implement or add DLC for and stuff, but instead you go for this game, which is one of the ugliest piles of garbage I've ever seen.
The stories that I break these days are usually always, not usually, always. And got some, I think, interesting information that I can share about Concord. I think people will be interested about it. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong, as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this is that Concord cost about $400 million to make.
Oh my god!
And
I know that I mention it, but every time I hear $400 million, it like resets my brain, and I'm trying to think of all the terrible designs, all of the terrible decisions, all of the things about the game that are so ugly and just repugnantly stupid, filled with DEI trash, pronouns for the robots. There were people that were getting paid to implement trash like that, and that's really where it resets me every time. $400 million for that piece of shit. Oh my god.
The story goes that Concord, by the time Concord was, so in the first quarter of 2023, Concord had basically entered an alpha state. This was before Sony had even purchased the team, but Sony had been working with Probably Monsters, which was the original owner of Firewalk and Firewalk, probably since late 2020, maybe 2021 at the latest, on Concord. The game was in development before that. Up to the point that the game went into alpha state, they had already spent about $200 million on it.
Oh, man.
And it's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game and how much of that money was from Sony. There's this term in product development, not only with games, but really with everything. You can manufacture a tchotchke. You guys might have heard of it. It's called minimum viability, or minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. The idea behind this, or MVP, the idea behind this is that this is what you're trying to achieve, and it's once you cross this barrier, you feel comfortable selling it. It's not that it's the best it can be, or that it's what it's going to be by the time you launch it, because there's all sorts of extra stuff you do to it, but this is the minimum viability of the product. When the game had already had $200 million spent on it and was basically in an alpha form in quarter one of 2023, from that point until the game launched, Sony spent another $200 million on it. The scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape when it was shown. and basically like when the alpha was ready to go, and they were kind of being like, we're ready to kind of get moving towards getting this thing out in the next year or two. It was in such horrible shape that Sony felt like they needed to spend that much money again. So 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP status, not to the status of it being like a great game, to get it to just viability.
Yeah.
And that at that time in Q1 2023, there was nothing done.
Oh my God.
A major expense was having to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios.
Wait a minute. Didn't they say that the development time for this game was like 8 years? And he's talking about in Q1 of 2023. What were they doing for all that time? They got $200 million. They had spent that, and they didn't have anything to show for it? What? This, honestly, this sounds kind of like a scam. Doesn't it? You've got $200 million. What do you have to show for it? Well, as of 2023, nothing. So Sony buys the studio, buys the game, buys the rights, and has to dump in another $200 million just to make the game even barely passable. Nothing seems to add up in this whole situation.
To finish building the game out. And that two fundamental things were not worked on at all up to the point in which the game was shown in alpha. Onboarding, nothing about that.
That's important.
Like there was nothing about how players get on, like how they make their character, all that kind of stuff, or choose their character and get there, and monetization. Two very expensive, very specific and boutique things that happen to games like this. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to say, is that it's not only about the ongoing cost, which would be in the millions to keep the game going per month.
Right.
But that the game cost about $400 million to make, soup to nuts. Oof. Sony put most of that money in, and it is not only so, because we had kind of said, like, this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is.
Yeah.
It's the biggest game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint, from the first party or second party.
Wow.
So let that sink in.
It's crazy.
And it's totally unintuitive. There are games that are in development right now at Sony, first and second party, that are more expensive than this. But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2 and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game costs more than that.
That's so nuts.
And they lost all of it because they made no money. They made about $1 million gross revenue, and then they gave it all back. So this is a huge, multiple hundreds of millions of dollar loss. Now the question is, why? Why did this happen? This game was heavily championed behind the scenes. Now we know this because Sony ended up... What's funny is that the game is presented in Q1 2023 as this, we're kind of getting towards the end. The game is nowhere near being done. It's in a horrible position.
Man.
And then Sony buys the team.
Huh.
The idea behind this was, and the term apparently verbatim had been used, that Concord is the future of PlayStation.
Huh.
That they had such major ambition for...
Well, let me stop you right there. They may not be wrong. They may not be wrong that Concord is the future of PlayStation. When you release a $700 PS5 Pro that doesn't have a stand, doesn't have a disk drive, and is basically a negligible upgrade, their reputation is in the toilet. So, if Nintendo comes out... By the way, I do want to add this as a little bit of an addendum. I was seeing a lot of scoffing at Nintendo charging $400 for the not the PlayStation, the Switch 2, basically. People were like, $400 for this woefully, inept console that's lacking in technology. Who's going to pay $400? Ever since Sony came out with that $700 monstrosity, Not seen a single word. In fact, people are like, well, if it's $400, that's not too bad. So, Nintendo's going to come out with a Switch 2 that's going to be backwards compatible. You're going to have all the games for your Switch online. So, all the N64, the Super Nintendo, the NES, the Genesis, all those games are going to be on your console from day one. And then, if they charge it at $400 and it's a noticeable upgrade, man, they are going to dominate right out of the gate. They're just going to dominate right out of the gate because it's backwards compatible. That's the most important thing. Backwards compatibility gives you access to all of the previous games. I'll tell you what, Nintendo's looking pretty good right now. No one's scoffing at that $400 mark. But anyway, yeah, if Nintendo can keep themselves from doing something remarkably stupid, they're in pretty good shape against the PlayStation 5.
This game, that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars-like project for
Ooh.
Sony. That it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross-media, but in what we were seeing. We've already kind of seen little bits of it. So the weekly story vignettes that they were going to release, and then, of course, the inclusion in Amazon's Secret Levels anthology, that's like just scratching the surface of it. Ironically, the game was codenamed Chaos behind the scenes. And a major thing about the game is that there was, and I think we can kind of get this vibe from just the nature of the people making it and kind of the way the game reads and all that, a toxic positivity vibe.
Yes.
You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game.
And that's not unsurprising. When you go the woke DEI route, usually people are like, well, I'm not going to say anything. If you want to mess this up, I'm not risking my job. I'm not risking my career. So they'll go along with it. And I know that there are a lot of people within the game development space that don't agree with this DEI garbage, but they're like, I'm not going to risk my career and my income in order to correct a corporation that's making a mistake. Because the corporation fires me and they get somebody to replace me. For them, it's not really that much of a blip. I mean, $400 million is a huge, massive road bump, though. But yeah, a lot of people they're just not going to say anything. And this toxic positivity, it's a problem. It's a problem because you're not actually addressing the things that are going wrong with the game. You're not actually having any real feedback. It's one of the reasons why I don't ban people from my chat. I know, it's a bit of an anomaly because content creators ban people all the time for any reason. I don't. I don't ban people at all. I don't ban people at all. Because I'm interested to see what the feedback is. Sometimes there are people that really don't like me, don't like my video, don't like my content, who leave an actually really insightful comment. Now, it's not often, but it does happen. And I read it and I go, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. I didn't see it from that perspective. I think there's value in getting the perspective of people that may disagree with you. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do what they say, but you can at least listen. Take the stuff that you think is actually valuable and throw away the rest.
About how, like, something's wrong with it, character designs are not right.
Oh, the designs were horrible.
And so on and so forth. They really, truly believe this was Herman Hulst's baby, apparently.
Oh, man.
And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. So it's not that... So the reason I'm telling you all of this, it's some interesting information, of course, but it's that I had said... When people were like, Concord lost $200 million. Now, people were pulling that money out because that's basically how much, like, some of the first-party games, like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, etc., kind of cost in that frame. And I was like, there's no way that it cost that much. I was saying, like, it cost 9 figures probably, like low $100 million, but there's no way it cost $200 million. No, it cost $400 million.
I was one of the people saying that it cost probably upwards of $200 million. We were both wrong. Because we could not have envisioned, either of us, the scope of the failure. The delusion, the toxic positivity that pretty much prevented them from talking about the major issues. And again, I go up to this fat, disgusting thing. They thought this was going to be appealing. They really did. They're like, yeah, this character right here. And the fat one in the suit of armor. I mean, the ridiculous outfits, the pronouns for the robots. I mean, all of that stuff was just so terribly done. And that's why a competitive workforce is important. That you allow people to voice their frustrations and their critiques and their criticisms, and to come out and say, this is shit, here's what I think would be better, and then to argue the ideas and come out to something much more positive.
So, and I am totally solid on this source, by the way. So that's why I'm willing to share it with you, because again, I'm not really a journalist. So, yeah, the big things to take away: $400 million loss. The game was in horrible shape as of 18 months ago before release. Not even monetization, no onboarding, most content not even there. The game was in such bad shape at that point that they spent the budget of it again in urgent outsourcing to get the game finished from all of these different angles over an 18-month period. Internally, the game was considered part of the future of PlayStation, with heavy cross-media references and a system of toxic positivity surrounding it that didn't allow anyone to meaningfully change the course of the game. Because if the people at the top truly believe in something, you're not going to be able to do much about that, I don't think, from the trenches. So I thought people would be interested in that, and just wanted to throw that out there. That Sony really saw this as a Star Wars-like project for them, like the potential to, and now it makes sense. Yeah. Not only why they spent so much money on it, but why they bought the team. So there are people there, and to me, it's unclear who exactly the people are. I know some of the names. I don't want to get too deep into that, because a lot of the things I learned were off the record, but obviously this is on background. And it's like, yeah, now it makes a little more sense. You spent, and by the way, the $400 million not included in how much it cost to buy the team.
Oh.
So, yeah, so Concord is Sony's biggest released game by budget to date, and it is the biggest loss that they've ever had.
And the loss is a result of, obviously, a woke left-wing DEI culture behind the scenes that didn't allow any sort of negativity to be discussed. And the reason why I emphasize that is because of the character designs, which are basically par for the course. You have ridiculously unattractive women with all of these quote-unquote diverse body types, but all of the diversity goes into them being hideously ugly. And this is what I have talked about on multiple occasions. And I'm going to pull up an image here that I talked about from Dragon Age the Veilguard. Nobody wants this. Nobody looks at this and is like, I'm going to buy this game. This is a freak. It's a circus attraction. And if you're going to the circus, that may be fine. You're like, oh, I want to see the man-jawed lady. But when it comes to fantasy, or when it comes to sci-fi, you want to see yourself as Neo. You want a girl like Trinity, right? I'm not saying that it's a one-for-one for your own personal story, but the point is, you want a Trinity. You don't want some ugly, malformed, like 6'2" brutish man character with a huge jaw pretending to be a woman. You want a female character that looks good, because that's the point of it. It's a fantasy. Or it's sci-fi, which is also a different form of fantasy. But at the end of the day, they only have themselves to blame for not listening to what their audiences wanted. How many more millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars have to be lost before you learn this lesson, old man? How many times do we have to take you out to the woodshed before you get it? We do not want diversity, inclusion, and equity. DIE. We don't want it. It's a repugnant, despicable, Marxist ideology that turns wonderful, beautiful women in the fantasy world into this. And I got to tell you, it's not working. And the sooner you figure that out, the easier and better it's going to be for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll see you next time.